Okay, Ted, did you observe any friction between Ed and Michael Anthony? Also, to your knowledge, did Michael in fact play all the bass parts on each album?
Yeah, Mike was a real solid, great bass player, and I never saw any friction ever. Ever. And Mike was so great. But also, the thing that made Van Halen was his high voice. He had a certain sound to it, and I gave it these pop sensibility things, and you hear those. It's part of Van Halen's sound. But he was really on the money, played all the parts. There might have been something that went down after I left working with those guys, but I was, in terms when I worked with him, and he was part of it. We worked out all of the arrangements in Dave's basement before we did anything else. We do that before we ever went into the studio. We take some lyrics from one song, stick it to another track. I mean, we played along with that stuff. And Mike was essential to all of it.
Over the years, in numerous places, there's been many parallels drawn between the debut Montrose records and your record with Van Halen. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit, because I first met Ronnie. I was producing Van Morrison, an album called Tupelo Honey, and Ronnie was my guitar player, and he and I both sang the background parts on Tupelo Honey. She's an angel, you know, and Ronnie was a hell of a guy and a great influence on me in a lot of ways. Ronnie and Old George were like innovators in the studio. Ronnie would bring in limiters and things, and we'd hook them up in different microphones, and he was really great. And a power trio, you don't have the chords out of the guitar. And Denny Carmossi was a monster drummer. So when I first met the Van Halen guys, Ed, he even wanted me to borrow Ronnie's Marshall Top for the album, and he did. They loved that band, and you know, I mean, I think they were kind of some kind of like a format, or if you will, for Van Halen. I think kind of looked at them. They liked them a lot, and Ronnie was a real innovative guy, just fantastic. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. What you did? So you did the debut record, and you did Paper Money, and then once Sammy was out and Bob James entered the picture as the singer. I was actually a part of that. That's a different story. I was playing with Bob at the time. Bob was really crushed that when Ronnie told him, you know, Ted's not producing the next record. What happened at that point? Why were you out of the picture?
I think probably because I was doing other acts. It was probably more of that. Because I love Ronnie, the whole thing. And Denny was great. Bill Church. I mean, they were a nice type band. I don't remember much about that. Sammy, I actually thought about Sammy when I first saw Van Halen. I thought, oh man, because Dave was pretty rocky, you know, he just couldn't really sing.
Yeah.
And so I thought Sammy would be great, but, you know, and he's a smart guy. So he learns from mistakes or from anything everybody else was doing. He always looked at the other groups around town. You know, the whole Top Jimmy thing and all this stuff. He's looking at all these bands, he learned. But to answer the question, I think if you're in a booth and you relax, you know you can do it again, you know you can do it again. I think that's how he found his footing.
Ted, I wanted to ask you a question. You know, I think what Kevin was trying to get at too is that even if you listen to the Gene Simmons demo as compared to that, and that's just done, the best I was able to figure out, just like 3 or 4 months before you take them in the studio. Even on the demo, it just seems like you understood what Dave did well and what Dave didn't do well. And where in a way I think that Gene, maybe he's here tonight, to his credit, but not the great.
You'd have an invoice to do.
Maybe by Clara. That because Gene only had a couple of days to work with them, he didn't really get what Dave did well and what Dave didn't do well, and you ended up with something that didn't really come off as well. What did you see that Dave did really well that you tried to play up? And
basically, I think, you know, Gene was really onto it. I mean, he's a great A&R guy and a great musician and a visionary. And if he hadn't gotten mixed up with those guys, it probably wouldn't have happened. I think they just needed to relax a little bit. They had to go to New York. They had to do all this stuff.
It's just about the I think like the screens and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
The siren screams, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he had a little whistle that he would blow, like a little siren, and I got him to laugh and to loosen up because he was self-conscious. He knew he couldn't hit certain notes. And everybody's self-conscious. I mean, everybody has a fear of being judged. I don't care how good you are. And once he knew that we were just having fun, and I thought, you know, let's have some heavy metal with sexy, let's have some laughs. And he found his form, you know.
Yeah. Great question. Thanks.
Greg, here's a question for you from Brent.
Okay.
What is the source of Drive My Car, Tomorrow's Dream, and Tomorrow's Dream that seemingly came out of nowhere and are mentioned in your book?
Yeah, so there's a couple of recordings that have sort of surfaced magically over the last few weeks, and I mean, things happen on the internet. You never know who's going to put what up on the internet. You know, I was able to make a lot of friends in Pasadena over the years, and some people who trusted me, and some generous individual was nice enough to say I have a couple of recordings of Van Halen and Gazzarri's, probably just a few months before Ted met these guys, doing some songs that had not been heard before, like Drive My Car, the Beatles song. And then the other one which really blew my mind was that at Gazzarri's, which my understanding from all of our conversations, Michael and everyone else I talked to, that Gazzarri's was really kind of more of a top 40 place. You had to play sort of teeny bopper music. And the fact that at some point, one night, I don't know where we go with Gazzarri when this happened, that Van Halen played Tomorrow's Dream by Black Sabbath at Gazzarri's. I mean, I can imagine. It's like, and the thing about that recording, Ted, I don't know if you've heard it, I'll send it to you if you haven't. Eddie sounds exactly like Tony Iommi. Now, Dave doesn't know the lyrics. He's like, what record is this on? He only sings the one verse, and that's it. That he wasn't a Black Sabbath guy, but the fact that Eddie, at Gazzarri's fifth set, sounds exactly like Tony Iommi, only kind of gets to what we were talking about with Mark Stone earlier. It's just they had that knack for being able to replicate the looks of these guys.
He would like to know if you were aware of any Van Halen songs that you were involved in that are still in the vault and have never been released.
I know, I mean, we did a lot of things, and what we saved, I just marked it as something in the future, you know, to be used or something like that. I'm not sure if that's what you mean, but we usually took parts of one song and melded them with others. And sometimes, if they would have an idea, and I would change little things, and they'd need to think about it, so we'd move on. Sometimes a chorus would become a chorus of another song.
Okay, Ted, I'm going to throw another one at you. I started seeing them live in like April or May of '76, and the thing that struck me about them was that there was a very distinct and pronounced progressive rock, a very dark progressive rock aspect to the band. Not completely, but there was that definite aspect to them. There were some songs and odd time signatures, and
House of Pain.
yeah, House of Pain, the original House of Pain, Believe Me, there were some other songs. And once the first record came out, I was surprised to see that that was basically all gone. Now, I knew it had been, that sort of material had been phased out prior to the record anyway, but I was wondering what your thoughts were on that particular aspect of Van Halen, that more progressive, darker aspect of the band.
Well, they had so many facets to what they did. The brothers used to come to my house on New Year's Eve. I lived right near here. They lived just up the street a bit. And I remember one New Year's Eve, Ed had my acoustic guitar on my Ramirez, and he was tapping on it. I said, "How can you do that, you know, without an amp and sustain?" He said, "Yeah." So we put that on, became Spanish Fly. But what I'm going is, they always were trying to evolve, and they heard things, and also I liked, trying to think of who the guys were, jazz guys, a lot of jazz, like Jaco Pastorius and those guys, and I would turn them on to what I like, and I'd play them jazz. And then when they got their dad to come up and play on the clarinet, we did
Big Bad Bill.
Big Bad Bills, and that Dave. It's like a cartoon, you know, the white claws are doing the stuff. When we did Hot for Teacher, Dave set up little seats in there, and they would sit like they made it into a classroom where we recorded Hot for Teacher, throwing shit around. So they always wanted to live it. But in terms of, they were always trying to get to another space, especially Ed, because Ed wanted to do something different all the time. He wanted to keep moving. One of the most creative guys I've ever met in my life. And you know, the other thing is I got along with those guys so well. We never once did we have a disagreement in the studio, ever. It was all great, because they know what they're doing. And so I think to answer the question, basically Ed always wanted to look at. Ed and I were going to produce Alan Holdsworth. And we finally got it done, but we had him go up to Ed's house. We sat down and he said, well, if you guys are going to produce me, the only thing I want is, I don't want you in the studio while I'm playing. So we were executive producers. But Ed and I also produced another Private Life or something like that. I forget who it was. But Ed was probably the one guy that was always reaching for something else. And I think he liked jazz, you know.
You should tell the story about Ed played the trick on you with Eddie played the trick on you with the mandolin.
We were doing this thing, and I wanted to add a mandolin, and so I had a microphone out there. And Ed goes out there, Don and Mike did, and I told him to change a couple things, and Ed started playing, and I said, that's getting good. He says, you know what, Ted? Fuck you. And he takes the mandolin and smashes it to bits. And I couldn't believe it, because Ed's such an easygoing guy, and he and Don had decided to do that to me, so they knew they were going to break the thing. Crazy story.
Ted also, I don't know if this, I wanted to share this one quick story. I think it got cut out of the book, but Ted, you also told me their sense of humor that they would leave you notes in the studio all the time. Like you come in the studio and there'd be like little notes taped up. Do you remember that?
Yeah, and a lot of tricks, you know, a lot of things that they say. I can't even repeat the words and stuff like that. and you know, it was always a lot of fun, and Dave was a lot of fun. It was more like a party, mostly. And I wanted to get that, because I had it all loose, and I always had a lot of beer, a lot of Krill, if you know what that is. So it was pretty much a party. I mean, it's not unlike what people think, you know, it really was. You know, I wanted to add one thing, is that I also studied history at college, and I started reading this book when he sent it to me, and I couldn't believe how great it was. I mean, I had to do a thesis, and I wrote it about the Night of the Long Knives in Germany, and he's writing something that's really accessible, you know, people, I think, care about, and he's a terrific book.
Thanks, that's really nice.
Thank you, too. So, here's the question for you.
Real quick, I wonder, I maybe not didn't prompt Ted right, but it told me that there would be like notes with Alex would leave up and say, hey Ted, gotta run and do a couple errands, and I'm gonna pick up some heroin, I'll be back later. Oh, you still have the note?
Yeah, I saw this note. It said, Ted, I went to a Ross Market to get some heroin. I'll be right back.
It's really amazing, really humbling that you know, have become involved and were willing to speak on the record. And can you talk a little bit about how that came about with Greg?
Sure.
I'll tell you right away, I had a very bad phone connection, and in Ted's hearing is not superb, and he was like, what'd you say? And I was like, this is not going well. But we got through that.
Oh, anyway, no, I mean, the accuracy in it, I mean, it was so, I would have been interested if I'd never been involved with this band, even if I weren't into that type of music. And I thought, somebody's getting this right. And his insight into the whole recording process and the psychology that went with it. And it was like I was seeing he could have been there. And I don't know how he got it, but he really nailed it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten involved. I don't do anything like that. I don't even go out in public if somebody wanted to ask me about what I've done. I don't like any of that. But this book nailed me. I mean, there's parts in there, it's like you're walking around, and a lot of it I had no idea. I didn't know about a lot of these parties and a lot of this stuff. And so when he started telling me things, I did just like that. He knew more than I did about what they did. Still don't remember things. And I pulled out Diver Down. I hadn't listened to it since and there was one little thing. Ed had this sort of resentment because he had this synthesizer lick, and he was playing it, and the album had to get done. The record company said it's got to be out there. Management, Van Halen's manager said, we got to get on the road, finish the album. So I said, hey, how about this Martha Vandel's record? Let's do Dancing in the Street. Ed says, fine. I also said, we did it. Later, I hear that Ed didn't like the fact that I told him to do it. At the time, nobody cared, you know. The point is, I went back and started listening to things because of Greg. I don't listen to things I've done. And I went back and I listened. I thought, hey, that's good. You know?